walking the serpentine path, following the footsteps of the ancestors, walking the serpentine path, making our way back home. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho. Following the serpentine path, life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Waudia Seed, and I'm a plant walker, song keeper, word weaver, artisana, visual and performance artist, womb wisdom keeper, and your guide on this serpentine path of life. Together, we'll dive deep into all things related to plant medicine, ancestral reconnection, intergenerational healing, womb sovereignty and bodily autonomy, rites of passage and initiation, time travel, shape-shifting, dimension hopping, the reclamation of our collective earth-based practices, and the ongoing, never-ending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Welcome to the serpentine path where the ancestors have called us back to. Let's start at the end and find our way back home together. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Waudia Seed. I'm your host, and today's episode is following the thread that I've been weaving over the past few episodes, all about spiritually intact sexual education and how we bring men and women together in this work. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, I'm cultivating a few different co-ed offerings over the next few months, including a free class on Wednesday, May 20th, an 8-week-long adult sexual education course starting in June, and an in-person event in Denver, Colorado during the second half of July. All of those offerings are open to both men and women. So if you are interested in joining in for any of those, please be sure to subscribe to my newsletter over on Substack in order to receive those updates directly in your inbox. Now, for today's episode, I'm sharing an excerpt from a recent community class that I taught called The Creative Potential of the Female Libido, which was all about the tools of distortion and disconnection that damage a woman's relationship to her erotic power. And while this class was specifically about women and our personal relationship to sexuality, everything that I share is also intimately interwoven with men and their sexual expression because the two cannot exist in isolation. All right, let's get into it. When Alani originally kind of reached out to me and was like, hey, I would really love for you to teach a class about women's sexuality. One, I was like, absolutely. I love talking about this kind of stuff. And immediately I was thinking, how would I want to frame this? What I want to really offer to women is how we can restore our relationship to our creative life force energy, also known as our libido, right? And the reason for this, why I felt that this was the thing that I wanted to call upon, is because every single thing that every single human has created on this planet since the beginning of time has originated from the female libido. because every single human being is birthed through the body of a woman, right? Like when we get really simple with it, like everything is coming through the body of a woman and through our sexual life force energy that is calling forth future generations. However, a really important thing to remember is that our sexual life force energy as women, yes, it produces the future generations, which is an incredibly beautiful, sacred, valuable aspect of our femininity. However, our libido is birthing things outside of that intergenerational family constellation that we are creating, right? It's birthing our community support networks. It's birthing all of our relationships and our friendships. It's birthing global business initiatives. It's birthing collective art projects. It's birthing mass liberation movements because all of these things are being stewarded by the female libido. The reason for that is because the female libido is like this, how to say, like vortex is the word that's coming through. It's like this vortex of life-giving prayers and visions that we as women, being the guardians of fertile life, that we are bringing forth, right? And so, for this reason alone, my understanding of the spiritual law of the universe is that women are more spiritually powerful than men in this respect because our bodies and our libidos are quite literally portals of both life and death, right? The womb is the origin of all of the creation, all of the destruction. And so the way that I see it is that if women were to understand the true nature of our libido, we would respect ourselves, our bodies, our time, our energy, and our boundaries in a way that would completely upend our current systems of domination, extraction, and depletion that we see just like destroying the world. I really, really do think that if women recenter the needs of our wombs, of our reproductive health, and our creative life force energy, which is our libido, in every single decision that we are making, the world will be a drastically different place. That is like my firm, firm belief and knowing in my body that that is like the truth that I hold and the prayer that I walk with as a woman. And so when I look at that, I can also understand that when we're holding the immense power of the feminine libido, we're also recognizing all of the reasons why the female libido is so aggressively suppressed and oppressed and repressed by all of these like powers that be, right? The powers that be that see like, oh my God, women, when they are online, they're unstoppable forces of nature. Obviously, we need to do everything to try to stop them, right? I get it. We're very, very powerful. And so I think it's helpful to lead us into this conversation about our libido by first orienting us to the tools of disconnection and also distortion that are working in our bodies, in our psyches, in our relational spheres, and just in the overculture that we're in currently, so that we have an understanding of like, how did I get here in this relationship with my body and with my libido? So, I think the best way to kind of lead into this is to talk about something that one of my teachers, Rochelle Saliga, talks about a lot, which is this death over culture that we're currently living in. And I would say that keeping women disconnected from our creative life force energy is one of the many branches of that death over culture. And so when we're looking at like what is a death over culture, a death over culture is an overculture that does not support the health and vitality of all members of our human family, which includes the women, the men, the children, and the elders. And so death over culture is existing in direct opposition to thriving life, right? This includes human life, animal life, plant life, and spiritual life. So we're talking about the realm of the ancestors, the elemental guardians, earth, air, water, and fire. We're talking about the realm of the spirit babies and the descendants to come, right? This death over culture does not support any of that. And so when I was feeling into this class, what are like, there's literally so many aspects of death over culture and ones that disconnect us from our libido. But the three that I want to really hone into today are going to be everything that has happened with hormonal birth control, because so many of us were put on it, oftentimes as young women. The second one that we're going to touch into is going to be all about pornography and hypersexualization. And then we're also going to talk about vibrators because that's like a big common one that disconnects women from our libido. So, when we're talking about birth control, I want to offer a gentle disclaimer around this because I come from, on my mother's side, my grandmother was one of the very first women to get on birth control in the 50s, right? And I understand why she did that. My grandmother was brilliant, right? She was trying to get her PhD at Yale, right? And her professors almost didn't admit her and didn't really give her the time of day because they were like, you're just going to get pregnant and drop out. And my grandmother was brilliant. And she was like, absolutely not. Like, I have so much work to do in this life. I'm getting this PhD. And so birth control was offered to her and she took it and it supported her path of service. And I'm incredibly grateful for that, right? What I also can hold, right, in the reality of how much value and importance and freedom and support that birth control has offered to women, I can also hold all of the scientific studies that I have gone through, all of my deep embodied study after being on birth control for 5 years, working with a lot of women who have been on birth control and who have transitioned off of it. I can hold both truths of what I have seen in the distortions and the impact that birth control has had on women. So, what I can speak to from my lived embodied experience and what I've seen is that what's happening with birth control, oftentimes women are being put on it at very young ages, right? Sometimes it's like right when their period is coming online. It's usually like maybe 14, 15, 16. One of my sisters was put on it, I think at like 12 or 13 because she had a lot of issues with her cycle. Very rarely are women actually being put on it to prevent pregnancy. It's for like other hormonal issues that are not being addressed. And what's happening at this moment in time is that we are completely transforming the hormonal matrix of a young woman during the exact moment that her desire and her magic are starting to come online because the shift into womanhood occurs when a young girl starts to bleed within an intact culture. That is the moment where she would be recognized as a woman in her community. With womanhood also comes this new relationship to her body, her sensuality, her sexuality. It shifts her relationship with men. It shifts her entire role in the community because she's no longer a girl. She's seen as a woman. And so, what we're seeing here is at this exact moment when she's shifting into womanhood and when her body is starting to go through sexual development, her hormones are transforming, and her libido is coming online really for the first time, like very strong. It's shut down, right? And so when we're on hormonal birth control, for those who do not know, we are not ovulating. It shuts down our actual menstrual cycle. There is no ovulation, no egg is being released. And when we're bleeding, it's a hormonal withdrawal bleed. It's not an actual release of either the egg that was released that because no egg was released, or the endometrial lining because the endometrial lining is not building and shedding every single month. So we are not ovulating on birth control. When a woman is not ovulating, which also happens during pregnancy and menopause, she is experiencing the world from the right side of her brain, the right hemisphere of her brain, which is the side of the brain that is actually producing testosterone. And so hormonally, when a woman is on hormonal birth control, her hormonal levels are more similar to a woman who has already gone through menopause, right? And so what's happening here is that young women are not actually relating to life from the perspective of her female territory. And female territory for an ovulating woman is everything internal. So it's her body, her emotions, her relationships, and her sexuality. When she's not ovulating and she's seeing the world from the right side of her brain, which is testosterone dominant, she is seeing the world from the perspective of male territory, which is external. Anything external, which is her job, her home, her finances, her career, and her outer world responsibilities. So we're seeing this masculinization of young women when they're first coming into, oh, what is my libido? What is my sexual nature as a young woman? Another thing that's happening during this time is that hormonal contraceptives sever the connection between the hypoaxis, which is the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the ovaries. So the ovaries are connected to her mother line medicine. This is because a little baby girl, when she is inside of her mother, at 20 weeks, she develops all of the eggs inside of her ovaries that she'll have for the rest of her life. And so the egg that then became us as women was actually inside of our grandmothers. So ovaries are connecting us to our female intuition. It's also connecting us to our entire understanding of lineage and like what our role is as a daughter in our lineage. It's also connecting us to our sense of value, right? Our value is really held in our ovaries in German New Medicine. When we have a lot of ovarian conflicts, a lot of it is coming up with self-devaluation stuff. When we're looking at the pituitary gland, this is the master hormone gland in our body. It's ruling our entire endocrine system. It's also where it's connecting to the pineal gland, which is like our third eye here. And so this is our deep spiritual intuition. And then the hypothalamus is the main control center for maintaining our homeostasis and balance in the body. And so that is also connecting our pituitary gland to the ovaries, which is essentially the bridge between the spirit realm and the physical realm, right? So the spirit realm is going to be up here in the pituitary gland. And then the physical realm is our ovaries down here in our womb. When we look at how the female system is built like that, our ovaries tie us to the ground, to the earth, to this physical experience. Our pituitary gland is opening us up to the vision in front of us. And so when we are on birth control, we are offline spiritually. Like we are not connected and we don't have access to true desire because our libido is being essentially sterilized in this moment. One thing that's super intense to learn about is that our ovaries are being shrunk up to 50% when we're on hormonal contraceptives. So that's like a huge, huge, huge disconnection from our mother line medicine. Another huge thing about this is that when we're on hormonal contraceptives, it can decrease clitoral volume by 20%. That's like a huge amount, right? And so when we're thinking about women and our bodies developing during this time and what's happening in our vulvas, our vaginas, and our clitoris, right? Like 20% of not having sensation in your body, losing those nerve endings, losing that tissue, that's a huge impact on how our libido is developing over time. And so a lot of what's happening right now, right, is that we're not ovulating, so we're not getting this cyclical understanding of what ovulation hormones feel like in our body. We're often having sex with people, but we don't really know if we really want to be having sex with them because we don't have any ovulation. There's no part of us that's saying, like, I really want to connect with this person. And so what I felt when I was on hormonal contraceptives is that I was like bamboozled, I feel personally, bamboozled into having sex without like a true erotic charge behind it because how was I supposed to know what that would feel like, right? Like my eroticism has been, cut offline. And so what I really learned during that relationship, my first serious relationship where I was on birth control the whole time, was to ignore my body and force intimacy and pretty much lay the foundation for like swallowing my desires and lying to my partner about our sex life, which seeded a lot of distrust, not only in that union, but in the unions moving forward, because that was my foundation of what intimacy was meant to look like. Another aspect of this is that because we're seeing things from the right side of our brain, we often will end up being attracted to like more feminine men because we're seeing the world from the masculine side of our brain. And so the other thing is that our unions are often lacking like true erotic polarity as well. And there's this like dampened sexuality there, like there's less charge. Another aspect of this is IUDs, right? I also had an IUD inserted. I had the copper IUD because I didn't want any more hormones in my body. And the important thing to understand is that when an IUD is inserted, we're going into the cervix of the female body, right? And the cervix is the root of the female nervous system in the body. And it's the entry and the exit point of what is called the conception vessel in traditional Chinese medicine. And so anything that is entering into the cervix is going to be communicated all the way up from the cervix to her lower lip here, right? When we look at the cervix and that the throat, the structures of the pelvic floor and the throat are so similar. So there's like a block in our cervix, which is distorting our nervous system, right? Because the cervix is the root of the female nervous system. The cervix can't relay to the body whether or not we're actually feeling truly safe in any situation outside of a sexual situation at all in our lives. Those communication networks are very like wires crossed kind of situation. The other thing about this is that the cervix is located, the cervix relay is located in the temporal lobe in the brain, which is all related to our memory, right? And so when the cervix is being blocked, the temporal lobe is having a hard time recording correct memory of, does this feel good? Does this feel pleasurable in my body? Is this sexual experience something that I feel good about or no, right? And so all of the sexual experiences that we would have had that would have recorded in our brain as, I don't like this, or the ones that we record in our brain as I do like this, the wires are crossed, right? Because the nervous system can't fully be truly communicating. The last part about this that I'll say is that when we have an IUD inserted, it's creating a chronic state of inflammation in the womb space. That's one of the ways in which it prevents pregnancy, because an IUD essentially makes life inhospitable, was what I was told. And so when we have this chronic inflammation in our womb space, this is the space where all of our creation originates, right? And so if we cannot be connecting to this creative seat of our body, we can't access the desires that are being held within them and really transmit and birth them into the world. So a lot of the time when I'll see women who are struggling with their libido and their connection to their desire, and they have a history of having an IUD inserted, what I would really suggest to them is go and see a pelvic body worker, like a pelvic floor therapist, so that they can offer some loving support to the cervix and release the tissue memory that's being held. Because I didn't even realize that my cervix was like still traumatized maybe 6 or 7 years after getting my IUD inserted and then taken out. And it wasn't until a woman put her hand inside of me, gently touched my cervix that I realized, oh my God, like I have been holding all of these blocks with my cervix, with my nervous system, and with my memory and understanding of how to connect to pleasurable and non-pleasurable sexual experiences until this exact moment. So that's something that I would really recommend to all women in general. I think we need pelvic body work, but especially those of us who have histories with IUDs. Okay, moving forward to kind of talking about pornography and hypersexualization. Again, I want to be delicate about this because I recognize that oftentimes men and women are being exposed to pornography in a non-consensual context, often at a very young age when our brains are still not fully developed. And a lot of the time, this is kind of like our very first experience of engaging with the adult act of sex. We either see it in pornography or we see like fairly explicit things on TV that is like porn, but not fully porn. And this is kind of our first understanding of like, whoa, adults doing something that's quite adult, right? And so what is being imprinted into our very young brains is a expression of sexuality that is not loving, it's not committed, it's not kind, it's not respectful, and it's not an embodied depiction of adult sexuality, right? Really what it is an industry that's profiting off of the ongoing re-victimization of a lot of sexual abuse survivors who are performing sexual acts for money, oftentimes for survival means, right? And so that's just the foundation of what the frequency of the pornography industry is. When we're looking at the brain impacts of pornography, First thing that's happening is that pornography is hijacking the mesolimbic reward system and it's triggering massive dopamine releases. So that's like going to exceed what dopamine levels would be released during natural sexual activity. So over time, the brain is decreasing the amount of dopamine receptors in order to handle the overstimulation, which leads to a level of tolerance where viewers need more extreme or more frequent content to be able to achieve the same kind of pleasure relay in the brain. The next thing that's happening with pornography is that we're reducing gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our impulse control, our decision making, and our motivation. What's also happening is that we're experiencing addiction-like symptoms, right? And so that's reduced motivation, increased anxiety, and desensitization to real-life sexual intimacy. So whether or not we as women are the ones who are engaging with pornography, or if we are in sexual relationships with partners who are engaging in pornography, our libidos and our nervous systems are not going to be in healthy conversation with this frequency of sexual distortion because our brains and our bodies are being disconnected, slash the brains and bodies of our partners that we are in sexual union with are disconnected, right? And so when we look at pornography and just general hypersexualization in the media, it also is leading to this decreased understanding of how profoundly intimate and vulnerable sex is, right? It is the most intimate thing that you can share with another person outside of having a baby together, which sometimes we forget this, but that is often the end result of sexual activity, right? Like babies come from sex. And so the two most intimate things that you can experience with a person is having sex with them, having a baby with them, right? And so what this is often teaching us is that to both men and women alike, safety, commitment, loving communication, consent, and mutual respect are not requirements for sexual activity to occur. And so if this sexual foundation that we're receiving as women throughout our early formative years of our sexual development, we're learning how to bypass, how to override, how to disrespect, and how to dishonor our own needs when it comes to what our libido is communicating. And that means when our libido is communicating yes, and also when our libido is communicating no. All right, the last kind of big distortion that I see a lot of women struggling with when it comes to our libido and pleasure and feeling good in our body is the whole conversation with vibrators, right? And what I would say about this as someone who used to use a vibrator for many years and who realized after a certain point how much it had actually disconnected me from my body was that it was this process of like gradual desensitization and numbing in my pelvic floor. It was a lot of like forcing my desire, right? Because the sensations are so strong that it doesn't bring you through that like gradual, slow state of arousal, changing the tissues, bringing more blood flow. It's like such an intense, quick, fast, like forced experience that it was also disconnecting me from my partners and shutting down my ability to communicate with my body and with the men that I was in relationship with because I didn't actually know what those stages of arousal really felt like in my body. Now, something that I think is important to understand is like the creation of the vibrator, where it came from. And what happened was that there was an era of essentially female hysteria in Victoria, England, where all of these women were coming to doctors complaining of what was called hysteria, the diagnosis of hysteria, which could be like anything. Any woman could be considered a hysterical woman for any reason. And these male doctors essentially treated them by manually stimulating their female patients, right? Manual sex. And what ended up happening was that all of these women were coming in, and the male doctors were getting carpal tunnel from performing manual sex on their patients, that they created the vibrator, right? And so this was actually a way, essentially, to like profit off of female desire, one, to get women off as quickly as possible without developing any degree of like true safety or intimacy or love or connection. And it essentially shifted our relationship to our libido of like something I can have control over versus something that I get to surrender and open to. What also shifted there, right, is that in that specific context with a doctor, which is a very strange power dynamic going on, is that it doesn't require us to be like fully, truly vulnerable with our partners and open our bodies up to them, to have a true exchange, to have a true dialogue, and more importantly, to have like intimacy enough with ourselves and to know what arousal feels like, to know what our libido is speaking so that we can translate it to the person that we're in the room with, right? So when we look at this, like, how do we heal from all of this, right? Like it's pretty intense layers of distortion that we're moving through. And it feels hard to figure out where do we begin. And I think a lot of women will go down the path that I went down, which is people told me when I was very young and suffering from a lot of sexual abuse and trauma, they said, you know, Tantra will be really healing for you. And so I went the Tantra route, and that was like traumatizing. People said, oh, BDSM is going to be really, really healing for you. You should go try that. And so I tried that, even more traumatizing. People were like, oh, you should get into like the world of sex magic. That's very healing. And so I did that, and I got very, very sick, right? Like I got to a point where I had a 9-month-long womb infection of pelvic inflammatory disease that went undiagnosed, and I almost lost my fertility. And so I went through this phase of being like, oh, I'm going to heal my sexuality with more sex because that's what everyone's telling me to do. That was the last thing that I should have been doing. It made it so much worse. And what shifted a lot of things for me was that I was living in the jungle with my elders. I was unintentionally celibate for many, many months. And I was really deepening into, okay, what is going on in my body? What's going on with my womb? There's so much pain. There's so much violence. There's so much distortion. There's so much illness. How do I heal this? And the two things that came up, one were my art practice, right? I was just like constantly drawing, painting, beading, weaving, singing, dancing, and my elders were really encouraging it and supporting me in that expression. But the other part of it is what we're going to talk about, which is reorienting to the menstrual cycle as the blueprint for our creative life force energy, right? Okay, so if you would like to access the full class replay for the creative potential of the female libido, all about flow, fertility, and sacred sexuality, that is going to be available over on my website. I'll put the link in the show notes, and it goes through the tools of disconnection and distortion that modern women face while relating to our libido, working with the menstrual cycle as the blueprint for our erotic power, and cultivating our own healthy inner masculine to support our creative work in our outer world unions. That full class is available for $33. Additionally, if you would like to receive access to my full classroom library, you can become an annual subscriber to my Substack, where you will receive access to extended paid episodes of the podcast, paid essays, 1 to 2 community classes every month with access to the class replays, and a 10% discount for any and all one-on-one consultations and upcoming group courses that I'm teaching. All of that is available to annual Substack subscribers for a one-time payment of $80. All right, that's it for now. Thank you guys so much. Ciao, ciao. Mm-hmm.